Tuesday, April 23, 2024. I woke up at about 8 a.m. from the first restful sleep I had had in a week and a half. I took time to just lay there for a few minutes and give thanks. I felt much relieved having found out about Alan, Ron Reagan, the group, and the added sense of security it brought. I got up, dressed in clean clothes, and made a pile of laundry. I strapped on the 1911. Downstairs, I made some coffee and went out onto the patio. There was a gentle southern spring breeze that had shifted the smoke and blown it north away from the hill. There were fires in all parts of the valley. I counted at least 31 that I could see, but I felt a lot less stress at seeing them than I did yesterday. I was still on alert, but felt a lot more powerful and secure. I was no longer alone. I sipped my cup and sat there just looking at the valley and considered what might be the new reality this group offered. While back inside getting more coffee and a power bar, Franklin had landed on the fence and was waiting for me when I returned to the patio. This poor guy, he was working hard to obtain food and was here almost all the time it seemed. He and his mate must be feeding a clutch of hatchlings. I assumed I would be busy and couldn't just hang out with a raven all day, so I put a big pile of kibble on the patio that he could access as he wanted. Inside, I retrieved the two-way radio and called Alan. He picked up right away. "Alan, this is Bill Albright up on Red." I suddenly heard a loud static over my words. "Hi, Bill. Sorry, I had to cover that. Don't use your street name or locations anymore on the radio. You never know who might be listening," he stated. "Anyway, I thought you were leaving early this morning." "I was going to, but I've decided to stay and do what I can to help out," I replied. "That's great, Bill. We need you. Thank you," he said. "What do you need me to do?" I asked. "Right now, I need you to do a body count on your street and bring it to a meeting at 11 a.m. in the park. I'm hoping we can start collection this afternoon. I will need a complete census by the latest tomorrow. We have to move fast." "Okay," I said, "see you at 11, and signed off. Damn it, I felt stupid about having used identifiers. Alan was absolutely right. It was so basic to security. I would never make that mistake again. It was now 9 a.m., and I had to work fast. My first stop was at the house of the female couple, Ann and Karen I had met last Friday during the food distribution. I knocked on the door. There was no answer. I knocked again harder. I heard from the other side of the door, "Who are you? Go away. I have a gun." "Ann, Karen, it's Bill Albright, your neighbor. I met you last Friday with a wagon of food. You remember me? I have found and joined a protection group of other folks in the neighborhood who have asked me to do a welfare check and census of residents on our street. Can I talk to you?" There was a long silence. I could hear faint talking. "Okay, but move to the end of the drive and we'll talk." "Okay," I said, and moved. The door on the second-story front balcony opened, and Karen came out. Ann stood in the door with a shotgun pointed at me. I put my hands up and said, "I'm going to put my gun down on the ground. Is that okay?" "Go ahead, but easy," Karen said. I slowly pulled the 1911 and laid it on the grass next to the drive. "What is this all about?" she asked. "We saw those people get killed and you and some other guy moving 4 bodies. She said they were frightened by the violence." I told her everything of what had happened. Schmidt stealing the wagon of food, killing Dick and Fanny, then coming to kill me, Phil and Gail, my plans to leave for Bishop, meeting Alan and Reagan, the defense group, my decision to stay and help protect the neighborhood. I could tell she was very stressed, and I asked if they were okay and needed anything. I told them about the meeting at 11 and that I had other houses to check on. I asked if I could pick up my gun and leave. She said okay. I thanked them, backed away, and turned to go to my next stop, the first phantom neighbor. At the house, I looked into the garage again, and still no cars were there. I knocked and called at the front door. Nothing. I carefully went around the side of the house, calling and knocking on and looking into the windows as I went. I saw no movement, nor heard any sounds. At the back door, I cupped my hands around my eyes to look into the room. I jumped back at what I saw. There were 2 children, maybe aged 10 and 12, and an adult woman, all sitting on the family room couch. The adult woman sat between the kids and had her arms around them. They looked terrified. I smiled, waved, and tried the door. It was locked. I said hello and motioned to the door lock. The woman, I assume the mother, drew the children tighter to her. I knocked on the glass door and again motioned to the lock. The boy moved free of the woman's arm and stood up. He said something to her that I couldn't hear, turned, came to the door and unlocked it. "Hello, I'm your neighbor, Bill Albright. What's your name?" "My name is Olan. My sister is Amira, and this is my mother, Naza," he said in accented English. I reached out and shook his hand. "Where's your father?" I asked. "We don't know. He went to work and never came home." I immediately understood the dynamic. They had assuredly run out of food and water. The mother, being helpless and alone during terrible times, had chosen the only option she knew, probably from her culture. She was afraid to do anything and just waited for her husband to return. The helpless situation, anguish and fear going through her mind must be a horror. "Olan, I am here to help you. Does your mother speak English?" I asked. "No," the boy said. "Where are you from?" I asked. "We are from Kurdistan. We are Yazidi. My father's Peshmerga and fought with American Special Forces. We were brought here to live last year." I flashed on a bit of information Alice had told me last year, that the previous owner had sold his home to a relief foundation. I didn't think anything of it at the time, but now knew their history. They were refugees from the genocide after Turkey left NATO in 2022. The Turkish military had swept through that region seeking a final solution against the Kurds, similar to their genocide against Armenia in 1915. "You, your sister, and mother can come with me. I have food and water. You will be safe, I promise." Olan turned and spoke to his mother in their native tongue. I could tell she was resisting what he was saying. Finally, Olan turned to me and said, "We have always been refugees. We will follow you." We left their house and walked back to mine. I brought them in and immediately gave them each a bottle of water to drink. I then gave them each 1 can of food, a protein bar, a liter bottle of water, and some hard candy. The mother clasped her hands together, shook them in front of her, and said something. "My mother thanks you," Amira said. "Tell your mother she's welcome. This food will last you for today. You can't stay here. You must go back to your house. I have to go to a meeting, and when I get back, I'll come over and show you some things to do," I said. Olin translated for his mother, who again made the hand gesture and thanked me. I showed them to the front door, and they left. They couldn't stay here. They had enough food and water for now. I didn't want them wandering around my house. I was sure they had all grown up around unattended loaded guns everywhere, but I didn't want them around mine. I got ready and headed to the meeting. It would be good to find out who was really in the group. If I didn't like it, I could still leave. Everything was ready for that, and I could be gone in 60 seconds. I got to the end of the street and turned to walk the several blocks downhill to the park. "Bill, wait up," I heard behind me. It was Ann and Karen. "We'll walk with you." "Okay, happy to have the company," I replied. "Where's the meeting?" Ann asked. "At the park. I've only met 2 of the group members, so I will be interested to see who else shows up." We chatted as we walked. Karen had been a registered dietitian years ago and an event caterer now, and Ann a middle school teacher. At the park, I counted about 40 to 50 adults, with several more coming in. Some looked in pretty bad shape, others pretty good. I saw Alan, reintroduced myself, and introduced Ann and Karen. Ron Reagan was there as well. I didn't know any of the other people, but I did recognize the angry resident I had met down at the abandoned cars last week. Like me, some of the people were also armed. Alan stood up on the bench. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming today. My name is Alan Jacobs. I have met most of you over the past several days. We all have had quite a time of it for the last 12 days. I know many of you are fearful about what has happened and might happen. I don't have a crystal ball to look into for the future, but I do know that together we are strong. I want to say here and now, I am not the boss of you. Someone had to start this ball rolling. I am an ex-Marine officer and combat vet, so I have a good background in making things happen and getting it done. The first order of business is to secure the dead and dispose of them. They are a very serious health hazard. We need to know how many and where they are. I raised my hand and said, I'll start. There are 5 dead up on Red Bluff Lane in one location. 1 dead 4 days, 4 dead 2 days. And so it went, street after street, until all streets were accounted for. The final number was shocking. As of today, there were 36 known deceased that needed attending to. Alan continued, My humble condolences to all of you who have lost a loved one, family member, or friend. I have too, and I apologize for what has to come next. It has been suggested that this park become a cemetery. I think its higher and best use is that of a safe place where the children can come and play. Anne spoke up. I'm a teacher. I agree. I can help with the kids and keep their lives as normal as possible. We can hold school here. This park should be for them. It's perfect. Others agreed. Thank you, ma'am. That's an important task. You will be needed. Alan continued. The only other alternative is to cremate them in the retention basin. There was a gasp from several in the crowd. I am sorry, but it's the only way. We don't have the manpower or calorie resources to burn digging graves for everyone. If you have a family member that you want to bury on your property, I'm sorry. The added work will cost too much in extra food and energy expended. I understand the pain of your losses. We all have lost. The world has changed. Our lives of 13 days ago are gone forever. Everything is going to be harder, emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, and physically. If you want to have a service at the retention basin, I encourage it. Again, I apologize if it sounds harsh. So please, for everyone's sake, bring out your dead. It's time. I will open this for debate. Does anybody want to voice an opposing point of view? A woman in the back said, I just think this is wrong. Yes, you are right on many levels it is, Alan responded. But these are times of extraordinary problems that call for extraordinary solutions. Does anyone else want to say something? The group was silent. If there are no other objections, let's vote. Of the 50 or so people, only 2 voted against cremation. Thank you. We will make the first pickups late this afternoon. You can start on Red Bluff if you want. Work top down, I said. Good idea. We'll be there hopefully by 4, Alan responded. How are you going to move them? Someone asked. Is Duke Nukem here? Alan asked. A hand went up. Duke is a classic car buff. He has a couple of pre-1985 vehicles he has volunteered, a pickup truck and a station wagon. They didn't get fried by the EMP and still run, he said. Alan quickly moved the neighborhood agenda forward. Security squads and patrols, weapons training and simple tactics, communications, operational security, demolition and construction gangs, fuel gatherers, battery crews, fire safety protection and fighting, water purification and sanitation, medical, dental, health and safety, inventory, food, weapons and ammo, tools, other useful resources, children and education, death and deposition of remains. Alan said, I know it's a lot to take in. We will be having ongoing rotating training classes starting this afternoon. These classes are mandatory or skill exempt. You will become a lot more comfortable the more you learn. You can sign up with June Culver. She raised her hand and said, "I'm over here." "We're hungry," someone said. "Yes, everyone is hungry," Alan replied. "We're working on a group food gathering and distribution plan." Karen raised her hand and said, "I'm a registered dietitian and event caterer. I know what's needed and how to stretch it. I can help." "You're hired," exclaimed Alan. He continued, "Folks, we are in uncharted territory. There is no owner's manual. Please be patient. We have to go from 0 to 100 right away, and we are working on it. You have to understand that none of us had to do this before 2 weeks ago." Alan called for street captains. I volunteered for Red Bluff and Ron Reagan for Jamestown. Others volunteered for their streets as well. Alan had one last thing to say. "Friends and neighbors, we are into a situational event that none of us have ever been through in our lives. Those lives are over and will never return. It's a world that none of us ask for, but we live in nonetheless. We will all have to contribute to the cause. You may be asked to do things that you don't want to or agree with, things that you have never done before, including killing. We will all sacrifice. We will all be challenged and tested. We will all doubt. We will all suffer. We will all be changed forever." "How bad can this be? I'm sure the government will fix whatever happens soon," a woman in the crowd said. "May I be blunt, folks? Do you want the truth?" Alan asked. The crowd murmured and someone in the back shouted, "Yes, the truth." Alan began. "I've been getting information from the BBC and other sources on shortwave radio. It's bad, folks. Worst case bad. There is no government anymore like we had. The electrical systems all over the country have been rendered useless, and transportation stopped cold by enemy attacks from either or both China and North Korea. The only thing running are the EMP-hardened parts of our military. Because of the EMP, there is no food production, no energy production, no distribution of anything, water, food, energy. Nothing is moving or being delivered. No law, no order, no legal system. America as we knew it is over. We have retaliated with massive strikes. Areas in North Korea no longer exist and have been turned into radioactive glass. China's economy is dead. Their ability to ship anything has been completely destroyed, along with their satellite network and missile capability. So what comes next? It is estimated that by 3 months from now, 90% of the American population, 315 million people, will be dead from violence, accident, injury, infection, disease, thirst, starvation, lack of medicine and care, suicide, psychological and physical breakdown. We will all see multi-level waves of chaos, savage predation and death, massive destruction, raging desperation, unbelievable violence, and the worst humanity has to offer. There is no more legal or civic authority. We are those functions now. The vigilantes, the law, judge, jury, and executioner. Some of you might feel to try and survive in our new reality isn't worth the struggle and would rather end it now. Some of our neighbors have already made that final personal choice. If that's your choice too, so be it. No one will fault you if you make that choice. It's your life. I understand. I have stood at the crossroads myself and will not judge. One request, please. Just alert us to your suicide so that we can mitigate the physical effects quickly. For those of you who want to move forward, you are about to descend into the very pit of hell itself. We will have contact with people who want what we have, all of it. Desperate refugees, men, women, and children, hardened and insane criminals, psychopaths, deviants, predators, gangs. Some will plead, some will negotiate, some will attack. Some attacks will be fronted by women and children to play on our hearts and sympathy. Do not be fooled. Do not be naive. The men behind them will kill you. We must turn back and defeat all of them. It will be hard to accept and cruel, but crucial to our survival. We are going to have to be more than a simple group of neighbors and residents on this hill. If we are to have any chance of surviving at all in this new world, we must become a community, a family, a tribe, brothers and sisters in arms, have each other's back, be interdependent, and believe in ourselves. We must pull and work together, be smart in all things, resourceful and resilient, prepared mentally, open to change, unflinching, and resolved to do whatever it takes, to refuse to give up. Some of us will die, most will live. None of us like what has happened, but all of our lives will be easier if we accept it. Our reality is evolving, and we must all evolve with it. We won't solve all of our problems by shooting them. It will take a metamorphosis in ourselves. If you despair, you will fail. If you have faith and believe in a higher power, I hope you will pray daily for guidance, strength, and deliverance. Thank you for coming, and may God bless each and every one of us. Please sign up with June for training. Street captains, see me over here. The crowd was silent. Then someone started. Our Father, who art in heaven. Many of us joined in and finished the prayer. Amen. Thank you, everybody, Alan said, and stepped down off the bench. Alan addressed the gathered street captains. Thank you for volunteering. We need to be quick with the dead. I'll schedule the pickup time with each of you. Please be available when the deceased collection vehicle comes. We'll honk the horn when there. Also, we need to know right away how many two-way radios we have available. Hopefully there can be one radio per street for you to use. Your neighbors are going to be a mixed bag. Some will rely on you for everything. Some will ignore you. Some will contradict and challenge you. Most are frightened, and I am sure some have PTSD. We don't want any trouble. You are not the boss on the street. You are a facilitator and in service to them, even those who haven't joined yet. We all need to try and make every life a little easier. You are also the eyes and ears of the group on your street and the first alert. Your role is critical. I am always available to you. We will have a meeting here tomorrow at 8 a.m. to go over what needs to be done, assign tasks, and set schedules. Please be sure to attend unless you are scheduled for body removal. See you tomorrow. The meeting lasted about an hour. I met and talked with a lot of folks and got a lot of information. I liked what I saw, what I heard, and who I met. Only one individual seemed like he had a chip on his shoulder. I had confidence that if we didn't get overwhelmed, overpowered, or blindsided, we had a pretty good shot at holding our own till the cavalry came. That is, if they came at all. Ann and Karen had waited for me, and we walked back together. I asked if they had any two-way radios. Karen said she had 4 she used in her catering business, and that I was free to take them. I told them about the Kurdish mother and kids I had discovered earlier and of their situation. I asked if they would meet them, and that maybe seeing other women might help to reassure the mother. I also asked if they would go over and keep the kids inside when the car arrived. I didn't want them to see the dead body pickup, but then I thought that they most likely had seen a lot more death in their young lives than any of us. At home, I sat down, drank a big glass of water, and ate a power bar. I was hungry and wanted a second, but resisted the temptation. I decided a couple of days ago not to listen to the BBC anymore. The big events were nothing I could do anything about or have any input or control over. Besides, I'm sure Alan had the news covered and would know when something really bad or really good happened. I could always ask him for an update and tune in myself. What had always been most important was the local situation. What was happening a mile down the road held more importance than 10,000 miles. I turned on the two-way radio and just listened. The range was a little over 10 miles given my high ground position. Things were desperate. People were starving and ill. The dead were everywhere. There were calls for food, medical help, and defending their homes. I heard folks coordinating actions and responses. I could tell the difference between defensive groups like ours and the predators. Radio traffic operational security, OPSEC, was indeed of prime importance. We didn't want to advertise our presence or location. We would have encounters soon enough. I went over to the Yazidi home. I showed Olan and his sister where to get pool water, how to filter, purify, and store it. I made sure they had lighting, and I told him 2 women would be visiting. I said I was very busy today, but would see them again. Back at my house, I busied myself in the garage. I knew I had a lot of items that would be useful, but didn't know about other homes. I decided to start a survey of other houses before the body detail came. I entered Phil and Gail's house. There were few food items left. Blankets and bedding, clothing, and some average first aid supplies. The garage held almost nothing usable except a gun cleaning kit, a few simple tools, and their cars that still had gas in the tanks and batteries. There was also a recycling bin with empty glass wine and plastic water bottles. I made a note and left it on the car's windshield. I had already been into the Goldsteins, so I bypassed that house. I went over to Ann and Karen's place. I told them I was going to survey the other empty houses to see what they held that could be of benefit and ask if they wanted to come along. Ann didn't want to and said she was going over to meet the immigrant family, but Karen said okay. We approached the first house, the Cattels, and knocked firmly on the front door several times. No answer. We made our way around to the rear, looking into and knocking on the windows as we went along. The back door was a hinged French style. We both looked inside and saw no evidence that anybody was there. I handed Karen a face mask. There will be rotten food in the refrigerator and freezer. This will help. I told her to stand back, and I broke the door glass pane next to the latch, knocked away all the broken glass, reached in, turned the knob, and opened the door. "Hello, Neighborhood Watch. We are here to help," I called. We were met with only silence. The house was a lot like the Goldsteins, with the amount of food items being about the same. We searched the house for guns and ammo and found both. There was no car in the garage, but it did contain some battery-powered hand tools and assorted other useful items. There was even a gas-powered chainsaw. We repeated this process with the next 2 houses, Levy and Johnson, and the results were about the same. All with food, one with a gun, all with no cars in the garage, but the usual items, some tools, rope, recycle bin, ladder, gardening equipment, hoses, etc. I was startled by the sound of the car horn. It seemed alien. I opened the garage door and we went out. Karen excused herself and headed over to the Kurds' home. Duke was driving and Alan rode shotgun. It was a 1964 half-ton short-bed Ford, 3-speed on the column and a dent in the door. Definitely a project vehicle. There were 4 others riding in the bed. I walked up and introduced myself to Duke and the others. Stan was a doctor, Ray a retired EMT. Ed and Paul were Afghan combat vets. They all had seen and experienced violent death firsthand and were not intimidated by the sight of or handling a corpse. "Hi, Bill, where are they?" "Right over there, Alan. 4 in the garage and 1 upstairs in the master bedroom," I replied. I entered Alice's house. It didn't have death in the air, and opened the garage door. Truck backed into the driveway. Duke stayed in the cab. Alan got out and said, "It's better that no one knows anything about these people, their names, addresses, or how and when they died. Agreed, I said. The guys put on face masks and rubber gloves. 2 had yellow 2-piece rain suits and the doctor's scrubs. They brought out a roll of heavy-duty construction-grade black plastic sheeting and went right to work. In about 15 minutes, the 4 bodies in the garage were wrapped in plastic and put into the bed of the pickup truck. Though I hadn't liked Dick and Fanny, I still felt bad about their murder and hoped they were in a better place. I couldn't say the same for the Schmidts. I wanted them in hell. Alan picked up the discarded pistol. We'll probably need this, he said. Next, they went upstairs to recover Alice. I said a prayer as they brought her down, still wrapped in the bedding, and added her to the others in the truck. As they finished, a large golf cart drove up. "A ride is here," Ray the EMT said. "What's next?" I asked Alan as he got back into the pickup. "We have one more stop to pick up one other on this trip. Then we'll take them to the retention basin. Then another trip up and down. There's plenty of wood from broken up furniture, cabinets, and salvaged demolition wood, and gasoline for the pyre. They'll be cremated at dark to hide the smoke. I think it will take about 6 or 7 cremations to get this cleaned up. Unfortunately, these will not be the last. I know there will be more in the future," Alan said. "Is this all of them?" asked Alan. "I hope so. Thanks," I replied. I decided not to attend the cremation. I watched the truck and golf cart drive off the street. Their task would be repeated many more times in the days to come. I went back to work. There was so much that had to get done. The 2-way radio traffic was a reminder that we didn't have the luxury of extra time. There were 3 more empty houses on the street I had not surveyed yet. Mystery House number 2, Schmidt's, and Dick and Fanny's. The front door was wide open at Dick and Fanny's place. Inside it looked like there had been a struggle, and some chairs were turned over and a lamp broken in the living room. There was what looked like blood on the carpet. The pantry had been cleaned out, and the kitchen cabinets ransacked. The house had the usual bedding, clothes, and sundry items. There were no guns. The car was in the garage, along with hundreds of books on shelves and in boxes. They were all the same title, Living a Peaceful Lifestyle by Lynn Gardner. There was a picture on the back cover. It was Fanny, so that was her name. I surmised she had been a self-published author and sold these books online and at local fairs. The 1 or 2 times I encountered her, she had impressed me as being aloof, cold, and unfriendly. In fact, she had come off as somewhat of a self-centered bitch. But then they say you can't judge a book by looking at its cover. The next house on the street was the remaining mystery house. It was the house on the corner at the beginning of the street, and I never saw anybody coming or going. The house was fronted by a tall hedge and large bushes. There was an older, maybe mid-2010s Corvette in the double driveway. It was covered with dust, and there were spider webs on the tires. It looked like it hadn't been driven in a long time. The garage door windows were blacked out, and I couldn't look inside to see a car. The front door was protected by a heavy-duty security gate. I sharply knocked on the gate several times and called out. There was no response. The front window had security bars as well, and the drapes were drawn. As I went around the side of the house, I could see that all of the windows had security bars and were covered. The gate to the backyard was locked. The same was true for the windows and gate on the other side of the house. I decided not to explore further at this house, but to report my findings tomorrow. I had a feeling it would be safer if several of us entered together. The last house was the Schmidts. I thought about the food encounter with them and the repulsion Gail had felt when we opened the front door before. The key was still in the lock, so I walked in. It looked like they had been hoarders. The living room was stacked to about 4 feet high with all sorts of bags and boxes. All were in a jumble, and there was no way I could even begin to go through them to determine what was there that might be useful. That could be done later. A path through the living room led through the dining room, filled with the same types of items, and into the family room and kitchen. They were far less cluttered and looked like they had lived in those rooms. The kitchen was a gold mine. The counters were covered and cabinets filled with canned food items, and the pantry was filled as well. I wonder why they had murdered Dick and Fanny for their food supply and stolen under threat all the food items in the wagon when I first went to their house. They obviously had not needed it. I went into the garage and couldn't believe my eyes. It was packed to the roof with case upon case of food items. Mac and cheese, top ramen, canned meats, beans, juices, water, spaghetti, sauce, soups. I was stunned. Back inside, I made my way back along the path to the stairs and went up. They too were covered with unlabeled boxes and bags. The master bedroom was cluttered, but had been lived in. But the other 3 bedrooms were again stacked up to the ceiling with many boxes of dried and canned food. There were bags of flour, dried beans and rice, plus carton after carton of toilet paper, and a lot more bottled water. This was a godsend and could solve our food distribution problem. I said a silent prayer of thanksgiving. I couldn't help feeling excited to tell someone. Better not broadcast it. I would wait until the meeting tomorrow morning to share my find. So my census of Red Bluff Lane was as follows. Living on the street, 6 people in 3 houses, Ann and Karen, Olan, Amira, and their mother Naza, myself. Confirmed empty houses, 7. Alice, Dick and Fanny, Schmidt, Goldstein, Phil and Gale, Cattell, Levy, and Johnson. Unknown, unconfirmed but probable empty house 1, gated and barred mystery house. The sun was setting, and it was time to call it a day, and what a day it had been. I heated a can of ravioli and opened a bottle of claret. What would I do when my wine cellar ran out? But I wouldn't have to face that for a couple of months. I went out onto the patio to eat my dinner. I kept thinking about the Schmidt food hoard. Why had he asked me for water when he had so much? Was he testing me, gaining information? I don't think they were average self-reliant preppers, but instead opportunists. If something happened, food and water supplies would be power that they could use to lord over their neighbors. What was the price they would have charged? We'll never know. I saw a raven flying south in the smoky burnt orange sky and assumed it was Franklin going home for the day. He was about a quarter mile out and didn't stop. That was good. He was still wild and free, doing the same things ravens have done for thousands upon endless thousands of years. They were not impacted by or the victims of the same vagaries and circumstances of mankind and our actions. They didn't make war, lie, or cheat. They didn't conquer or displace, and took only what they needed to survive and make the next generation of ravens. What happened in Raven World stayed in Raven World. Smart birds, I thought. I decided to watch the sky darken, let my guard down, finish the bottle, and get comfortably numb.